Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to mismapasion. And geez, would you look at that? The football is coming thick and fast as the season comes to the thrilling end, and the Women's Super League is no stranger to such levels as teams both up and down the table continue their final pushes to seal some favorable positions in the table. So let's get stuck in the weeds to see how some of them got on this past weekend in Game Week 20 of the WSL. We begin this video on what is a very somber note, which I just honestly want to get it out of the way quickly given how heartbroken I am, because, dearly beloved, we're gathered here today to celebrate the life of Crystal Palace of the WSL. Tenacious, front-footed, and always ready to put in a shift despite their glaring inferiority, the Eagles' fire simply was not haughty enough or sustained enough to brave the harshness of the WSL. And on this miserable Game Week 20, it finally gave out as Crystal Palace's long-awaited and delayed relegation was confirmed after succumbing to a devastating 7-1 defeat at the hands of West Ham, with Asseyi, substitute Harries, and Shakira Martinez, the latter with 4 goals to her name, putting the South London side out to pasture, and the league with Katie Stengel being the one to grab a miserable consolation goal from the spot. Ultimately, all's well that ends well, and for the time Palace were in the league, it was indeed well. Good night, sweet princess. We barely knew thee. Moving on from my internalized soap opera, and the genre of the weekend quickly swooped into an action-packed thriller thanks to a nothing encounter between Liverpool and Tottenham that honestly over-delivered, considering that neither team had much to gain from this match, except maybe Tottenham, who were looking to finally win a game, which is something that both the women's and men's sides appear to have forgotten how to do for the most part in 2025. And a little bit of the fact that they're somewhat in a relegation dogfight, but that's neither here nor there for now because they're a little bit safe to Lily Whites. But despite not knowing how to navigate their way to a win recently, Spurs still knew their way around the pitch and set the mark in this game early on, with Beth England causing some early issues for Rachel Laws. Liverpool though were on hand to keep out any danger and eventually found their way into the game proper and soon opened the scoring from a well-taken opportunity from Roman Haug, who capitalized on a failed clearance from a corner routine. Liverpool's joy though would not last long, as some poor communication at the back for the Reds resulted in some butterfingers from Rachel Laws, who inadvertently bungled the ball over the line to bring the away side back into the game. Invigorated and the better side by far in the first half, Spurs maintained their good run of play and took the lead for the first time in the game just 5 minutes after drawing level, with Claire Hunt being the one to slot home from a corner. The intensity maintained throughout the remainder of the first half and well into the second, which didn't wait too long to see another goal, but this time from the Reds, with Roman Haug rising highest to get her second goal for the day and bring the two teams on level terms with each other once again. With the clock ticking down and 3 points up for grabs, both sides went for it ambitiously, with Spurs in particular cutting Liverpool open time and again, but failing to find the killer pass or shot when it mattered most that would bring them sweet victory. Ultimately, nothing to separate the two, with the Reds and Lily Whites sharing the spoils of what was an emphatic encounter that again was far more enthralling than it needed to be, which is a commendation on both sides and how much they brought to the table in this match, in this magnificent encounter that exemplified the spirit of battle. The intensity of the previous match was arguably improved upon in the following that saw Everton welcoming Brighton and Hove to Merseyside, with both teams looking to bag a win, especially the visitors who were on a form of 3 losses in a row coming into this encounter, whilst Everton were looking to confirm their spot in next season's WSL, so there was definitely a lot to play for and the players knew it if their performances were anything to go by. The start to the game was fast and furious, and an attack against the run of play early on yielded the first goal of the game, with Sarah Holmgard lobbing home across from Schnois to give the home side the early lead. Everton maintained the pressure on Brighton and nearly doubled, but Schnois hit it unfortunately wide. On the other end of the field, Brighton took inspiration from the opponents and soon capitalized themselves, with Agmayag making 2 goals in 2 games for herself to bring Brighton back on level terms, which would not be level for too long, as Everton responded soon enough after the restart and restored their lead, with Schnois finally getting her well-deserved goal after having been a frequent threat to this point. With already 3 goals being scored, you would think that Everton and Brighton would leave something for the second half, but then again, you'd have been mistaken. Because once again, the visitors took inspiration from the hosts, as Frank Kirby, who had assisted Aubameyang's goal, would be the one to draw her side level again going into the second half. Some personnel changes in the second half allowed for the intense back and forth to endure, with Paris and Payne providing some new opportunities to pull their respective teams ahead, but neither finding the killer edge to do so. As the game wore on, the scales were tipping ever so slightly in favor of Brighton, who had managed to pace themselves whilst Everton were looking decidedly fatigued and weren't as gung-ho to attack the opposition goal as much and appeared to now be looking to settle for a draw. That, though, was not on the agenda for Brighton, who literally at the death snatched victory with an unmarked through ball from McLaughlin, meeting the path with Nikita Paris, who fired home into the corner to finally end Brighton's run of losses, whilst Everton are starting to look a bit out of it now, which is a concern considering that any more poor results and they might just find themselves in relegation dogfight. But one more win will be just about enough for the Toffees, so the onus is on them to see things through at this point. Sunday's action rounded out with Manchester City taking a trip to Leicester in a match whose results had ramifications on both ends of the table, with City wanting to keep their fleeting hopes of a Champions League spot alive, whilst Leicester City were looking to maximize their remaining available points in the hopes of staving off relegation. So, as you can see so far, the running theme of this game week is literally just about survival and ambition to just get the best possible positions because the competition is just that thick. But anyway, with this in mind, Leicester City took the initiative early on and came close on more than one occasion to shocking the citizens, but the finishing from the Foxes left a lot to be desired. Despite this, they endeavored to persevere, but the opportunities became less and less as City found themselves growing into the game and came close themselves to scoring with some great individual attacks from the likes of Murphy. As the second half commenced and continued, Leicester were on top of things and were far more potent going forward than City, and honestly should have scored on more than one occasion, with City goalie Keating having to come to the rescue on more than one occasion to keep her team in the game because her defense were just struggling to cope with Leicester's tenacity. The game would finally see a goal, but disappointingly not for Leicester, as it would be City who would find the opener with a rifle of a shot from Jess Park that proved to ultimately be the winner in what I can safely say was a last gasp winner from City, who snatched all 3 points to keep their European hopes alive, albeit slightly, whereas Leicester will feel hard done by as all their effort and hard work could not even yield a point, which can be argued was highly deserved considering how they performed in this game. But all's not quite lost though for the Foxes yet, who can still pull off an escape but will need to rely on their own performances in tandem with other results going their way in order to do so, which would honestly be so deserved if the performance from this game alone is anything to go by, so hopefully they can stave off relegation. The action resumed on Wednesday, where the Champions League participants in Arsenal and Chelsea got around to playing their obligated matches with the Gunners in action first. Taking a trip to Birmingham, the Gunners took on Aston Villa with some extensive rotations taking place on both sides, which would yield some differing fortunes again for both sides. The opposing sides were feeling each other out in the early goings on, with Aston Villa being the more positive of the two teams, with Ebony Salmon being a live wire, constantly finding joy down the left side, where Greenholm Katie Reid was stationed for the Gunners. Villa's confidence grew, and as the home side managed to keep the visitors at bay in defense, with D'Angelo coming in clutch more than once, her team would devastate the Gunners on the transition, with Salmon combining 2v1 with Knobs, who made no mistake to open the scoring against her former employers. Villa were on top, and their goal-scoring escapades were not finished, as deep into extra time, a sensational golazo from Kirsty Hansen, who might I say is in very fine form, fizzed past Arsenal goalie Zinsberger to give Villa the decisive lead going into the second half. The Gunners were completely out of it, and the misery only continued for them, as despite some substitutions made by Renee Slegers, some miscommunication between McCabe and Zinsberger allowed for the chasing Grant to snatch and dig the ball into the empty net to make it 3-4 Villa with just 46 minutes gone in the game. Arsenal continued to falter and struggled to carve out something worthwhile for themselves, as they were punished yet again on the break by Aston Villa, who made it 4, courtesy of a well-hit shot by Rachel Daly. To their minimal credit, and I mean very minimal, like minuscule credit here, Arsenal did attempt to mount a comeback and came close with Celia Blackstenius and Alicia Russo cutting the deficit in half, but that was before Chastity Grant would soon score Villa's 5th to put Arsenal well and truly out of their misery once and for all, with the Gunners falling victim to their kryptonite, which is failing to defend against counters and effectively gift wrapping the WSL title with a bow on top to Chelsea, who just had to gain a point now in their own encounter later that day against Manchester United. Despite being clobbered by Barcelona over the weekend, Chelsea's spirits were definitely lifted by Arsenal's thrashing at the hands of Aston Villa, but they had their own work to do to just claim a draw against the same team they played against last season and a couple of seasons before to win the league, Manchester United. Knowing what is at stake, the Blues started off very well and had control of the ball and game early on, with Mayra Ramirez threatening Tola's choice early on. United, though, were not going to allow themselves to be pushed over for Chelsea's glory, nor was effectively a warm-up to the FA Cup final clash later down the line, and the Red Devils brought their own fire to the game as Blues goalie Hannah Hampton had to come in time and again to prevent the likes of Galted, Clinton and Mallard from delaying Chelsea's title celebrations. Her hard work proved fruitful as both teams remained level going into the second half, and the war of attrition between the two sides raged fervently, and United had wrestle control of the game and threatened time and again to go ahead, but again, Hampton held firm to keep Chelsea in the game. The champions-elect were suffering through it, but were finally granted a reprieve, with Lucy Bronze heading home from a corner to finally open the scoring and put a hand on the trophy for Chelsea as the clock wound down. This ultimately proved to be enough of a confidence booster for Chelsea, who began to reclaim control of the game as United wavered up until the very end, where the referee called time and effectively rang in Chelsea's unprecedented 6th WSL title in a row, and the celebrations were cued as the Blues did run out deserved winners of the league this season. They are still unbeaten. They have only suffered 3 draws off the top of my head if I remember correctly, and no one could touch them if we're being very honest, and it's a very well deserved title from Chelsea, and the rest of the league should definitely look up to them to see what is required to make themselves champions, especially Arsenal, who fell just short when needed, but at the same time, you're being very generous when you say that. I'm being generous if I'm being honest, because again, you couldn't touch Chelsea given the form that they showed in the league this season. And with match week number 20 now concluded, this is the lay of the land on the table, with number 1 and number 12 now being confirmed, with Chelsea and Crystal Palace now awaiting their respective partners in second place for the Champions League and the Championship. Despite the ludicrously bad performance against Aston Villa, Arsenal are still a lock to claim the second automatic Champions League spot ahead of Manchester United, who they're 2 points ahead of, but the last 2 games for either team will not be easy, with the Gunners travelling to face Brighton, whilst United have a derby against Manchester City before the 2 teams meet each other on the very last day. Meanwhile, in the relegation spot, there's still something to be determined, with Leicester City, Aston Villa and Tottenham all staring down the barrel, so it's a matter to see who's going to blink first and get shot between the eyes, because all 3 teams have potential banana skins, with Palace, Chelsea and West Ham on the respective horizon, with Spurs and Villa particularly hoping for Palace to get a result to sink Leicester's fleeting hopes, so Sunday definitely cannot come soon enough. But anyway, that will do it for today's video. What are your thoughts on this week's games, and how do you think the remainder of the WSL will pan out? Who will make it to the Champions League, and who will go down to the Championship? Leave your thoughts on all this and more in the comment section below. Like, share, subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.